Okay.
Oh my God, hello and welcome to
Hey,
our Heal podcast. Very excited to have our guest here today, William Douglas. I don't know, you like to go by Bill better?
yeah. Well, I signed my book, William. So I like to get introduced as William, but then Bill is what I'm used to.
Of course,
I
yeah.
thought William maybe it would make people think, oh, maybe this guy's smart enough to have something I need to read.
Bill and William sound smart, and what an amazing lifetime of achievements you have here. Really, I'm super impressed with all of the things that you have accomplished and done over probably a number of years. And I would love to talk more about all of the things that you have been doing, including the World Tai Chi Day. Maybe we could start there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you want me to just kind of describe it or?
Yeah, whatever you think.
Okay, well, first of all, let me tell people what World Tai Chi Day is. World Tai Chi Day started in 1999, about 15
Wow.
years before the World Yoga Day. And
Mhm.
what happened was uh, both of my parents died of stress disease. And uh,
Mhm.
and when I was learning this stuff, I was trying to get everybody that I knew to do it because it makes you feel so good, you know?
Of course, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you become kind of like an evangelist. And but they never did it, and they eventually passed away from stress disease. And my mother had written a note the night before she passed away, and in the note she said, "I wish I could go back a few years and learn the arts of relaxation you were trying to teach me for a
Oh,
healthier life, so that I could have lived to see my
wow.
grandchildren grow up." And so that note, it's like I read that, and I wasn't a teacher at the time. I was just telling my friends and family about this stuff. And then years later, I started teaching in major hospitals, and I got my first hospital class. And I was a pretty young teacher at the time. This was like almost 40 years ago. And I started these doctors. There were a bunch of old doctors. It wasn't for doctors; it was for the public. But a whole bunch of doctors were curious because it was kind of weird having yoga and tai chi and meditation in
Yeah, back
hospitals.
then, yes,
Yeah,
for
back
sure.
then. Yeah, and so they were curious, and so they enrolled, and they were started getting off of these medications they'd been on for years. Chronic pain medications, uh, hypertension medication, stuff like that. It was blowing their minds, and so they started going to their data. This is before Google, or before I knew about it, and they started going to their hospital database, and they started doing research on Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, uh, and they started handing it to me because it was validating the the healing that they were getting.
Yeah.
And so they were so excited about it. And when they first started handing it to me, I was thinking, why are they giving me this? I'm a Tai Chi teacher. I'm not a doctor, right? But
Yeah.
that stack just started getting bigger and bigger. And eventually, what happened was there was a synchronicity because right when this started to happen, that's when Google came along. And then I was
Hmm.
able to start researching out, and I found out that there were tons of research on Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, and mindfulness. Dr. Herbert Benson at Harvard, he wrote the relaxation response. That was like the first Western scientific approach to this stuff. And so anyway,
And so sorry, all this research was done in before the 90s.
it was, yeah,
Oh,
that's
goodness.
correct. That's
Oh,
correct.
wow.
Now there's been a ton more research
Of
since
course.
then. And
Yeah.
one little note that makes this even more amazing is that the NIH, that's where people go to get their funding for research.
Okay. Yeah.
The NIH, less than 0.5% of funding goes to research mind-body practices and alternative medicine,
I
right?
don't.
And so it's all pharmaceutical driven.
Yeah, of course.
So it's amazing that we have this mountain of science. There were researchers that were just dedicating themselves to making sure that people understood how profound these practices like Tai Chi and yoga and meditation and Qigong are. And so anyway, the synchronicity that occurred with me was that I started seeing these doctors healing from the same problems my parents were having. And right about that time, I was in my basement digging around looking for some old stuff. And I came across that note because my mother had died and written that many years before. I was pretty young when she died. And And so I pulled that note out, and she said, I wish I could go back and learn this so I could live to see my grandchildren grow up. And so I realized that there were hundreds of millions of people around the planet, just like my parents, just like these old doctors that were enrolling in my mind body class. And
Okay.
so I started taking this science and I started sending it out to media all over the world. And I said, you guys need to be telling your readers and viewers about this, right?
Yeah.
Well, they weren't the least bit interested. They could care less. They could care less. And so I got so frustrated. And then one day I was in my backyard and I was meditating. And, you do your Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga and stuff, and you try to let go of all
Yeah.
that stuff. But that frustration was in me. And then all of a sudden, this idea popped into my head and it said, Tai Chi is very visually spectacular. If you can get a mass of people doing Tai Chi in a
Yeah.
beautiful public location and then invite the media cameras, they won't be able to resist pointing their cameras at it. It'll be too much of a visual spectacle to ignore. And then
Yeah.
once you get that media microphone, you can tell the public about the science. And so what we did was we created a fractal. When we did that in Kansas City, we got 200 people to show up. All the local media covered it, and CNN picked it up. And then we started getting contacted by other Tai Chi groups, and they said, hey, we want to do this too. And so we ran to our computer and we found out we could get worldtaichiday.org. And so we grabbed it. And then the whole thing sprang from there. And what we did there was we created a fractal of what we did. So we put like a how-to, because I had written the Complete Idiot's Guide to Tai Chi and Qigong
That too, yeah.
many years ago. Yeah. And so I wrote a Complete Idiot's Guide to the Tai Chi, to how to use World Tai Chi Day as a vehicle to expand your teaching in your community. And so we taught people, how do you organize an event? How do you get media to your event? How do you use that media microphone to tell about the science? And if you go to worldtaichiday.org and you look under the Tai Chi and Qigong tab, you'll see medical research. And if you go to that, you'll see medical research. What we have is we have 100 of the most common health issues that people face. And if you click on any one of them, like heart disease, what it'll do is it'll show you all the Tai Chi and Qigong, but also we've expanded it as this has grown, we've grown. And so now it has Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, and mindfulness, because those are the big five. Dr. Herbert Benson, the big five at Harvard, and have lots of research behind them. And so you can go there and you can see how yoga will help treat your heart disease, or how meditation will help treat your heart disease, or how
That's
Tai Chi or Qigong. Yeah. And so all these teachers were doing this all over the world. So we created this fractal and it spread out all over the world. And over the course of these almost 27 years now, groups all over the world coming together and doing this, we've reached over 1 billion media readers and viewers with science on mind-body practices, because people are creating these public spectacles and then using the microphone like we did.
Yeah.
And we've gotten government bodies all over the world to officially proclaim World Tai Chi and Qigong Day. The National Congress of Brazil, the senates and legislatures and governors of like California, Texas, Alaska, California, New York.
Canada a country that's connected with the World Tai Chi Day?
What did you say?
Is Canada connected with the
Oh,
World
yeah,
Tai
yeah.
Chi
There's
Day?
events all over Canada. Yeah, it's been covered on national Canadian media.
Oh, wow,
Yeah,
great.
yeah. We have video of the national Canadian media talking about it. And yeah, and then one of the things that happened was that a lot of these groups around the world, they started inviting yoga teachers and meditation teachers and mindfulness teachers to their World Tai Chi and Qigong Day events. And so it became this multidisciplinary mind-body event. And then eventually the United Nations created the International Day of Yoga 15 years later. And we think that we inspired that, to be honest with you.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. So yoga and Tai Chi, when I first started doing Tai Chi, there was like a split between the Tai Chi and Qigong, like we were two separate things in competition or something. And even within the Tai Chi community, and I'm sure with yoga, it's the same thing.
For sure.
Different styles and schools would look at each other like competition, and they looked at other teachers like competitors. And we tried to encourage all the organizers. We said, invite everybody in, invite other schools in, invite yoga people in, invite meditation people in. And so we were learning from events, because there were massive events like in Cairo, Egypt. There were thousands of people at their event, and their event went from the afternoon all the way to like midnight at night. And they had Sufi dancers at night. It was really spectacular.
Oh,
And
very
yeah, and
nice.
so they had yoga, meditation, mindfulness, and everything. And so we started, the whole thing just grew. Yeah.
What do they add into the mindful, like for mindfulness? So you have Tai Chi and Qigong, I know, and yoga and
Mhm.
meditation, I know. In
Yeah.
mindfulness, is it more breath work practices, or it's a variety of things in
Yeah,
mindfulness?
well, I haven't like officially enrolled in John Kabat-Zinn's program, but I followed him religiously on
Yeah.
YouTube. And so it seems like what the gist of it is being in the moment. And
Yes.
so what science is starting to talk about, if you go to heartmath.org, you can see some of the science on this. It's in my book. My book's free today if anybody sees this today.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
Yes.
on June 24th, 24th, that'll be the last day. It'll be free. It's been free for the last 4 days to celebrate World Yoga Day. And so it won't be free again until December 31st, World Peace Meditation Day. And but
Okay.
everybody can get it free today if they see this video today.
Okay.
And uh, uh, we're kind of lost track. What was it we were just talking about?
Oh my God. You were giving away the book you were talking about what are we talking about?
Uh,
The measure, no, not the measurement, the World Tai Chi Day. Mindfulness.
Yes, mindfulness. Okay. Yeah. So, so it seems like the gist of John Kabat-Zinn's teaching is just being present. So I know one of
Yes.
the exercises they do is they put a raisin in people's hands, and they have them just
Interesting.
look at that raisin, and just look at it from different angles and see the light glinting off of it and the texture and everything. Really looking at it, and then really smelling it. You know, really smell
Uh-huh.
on it. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
they have them touch it, and feel it, feel the texture, and then
Yeah.
they have them place it in their mouth, but not eat it, and then feel it. So it's like that kind of thing. And so I'm
Okay.
always teaching my Tai Chi and Qigong students, it's like when you
Yeah.
take a sip of coffee or tea or water or whatever, do what I teach my grandchildren. I tell them, okay, now when you take that, do you feel that silky feeling in your mouth? Do you
Yeah.
feel that going down your throat? Do you feel
Really
that going
being
into
in the
your stomach?
present moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong, I think what they are is they're really high level mindfulness practices.
for sure. And
Because the
using the
goal is to
body as a
feel.
tool more.
Yeah, and you're feeling.
Yeah.
The science calls it heart-centered consciousness, where you're feeling. So you're not in a beta brainwave, busy brainwave state. You're in an alpha brainwave state where you're in Tai Chi and Qigong, we call it yin consciousness, where you're
Okay.
you're receiving, you're feeling. You're not actively engaged. And
Yeah.
so, like, even with yoga poses, I apply this to my yoga poses. So it's like, yeah, I'm trying to do the yoga pose, but then I'm trying, as I'm doing the breath, I'm trying to just feel it letting go. Feel. So
Yeah.
I'm not straining to stretch. I'm feeling it letting go. Yeah.
And feeling the movements between the postures, which is more like Tai Chi and Qigong, probably because you
Yeah.
have that constant flow of movement. But
Well, and then what is it? The sun salutation?
yes,
That's real Qigong-esque because you're
yes,
flowing
I
from
bet.
one. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
My Tai Chi and Qigong has profoundly benefited from being exposed to yoga.
Well, to be honest, I haven't had a lot of experience with Tai Chi and Qigong, so small amounts. There was a man in another town in Costa Rica that I met. He was like a raw vegan guy, and he'd been doing Qigong and Tai Chi. He swore by it for years. So I did a little bit with him, and I think it's beautiful practice. It just didn't happen to be that wasn't my practice, what I had the
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
knowledge of. But I
The
find
way.
any practice that brings peace and calmness and healing is beautiful. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the way that I approached yoga, in my case, for example, was I just looked at it like an extension and addition to my core Tai Chi and Qigong practice.
okay.
And then I just absorbed, things from yoga into my
Yeah,
Tai Chi and Qigong practice. And so yoga people can do the same thing with Qigong, and it's easy
exactly.
to do, especially Qigong. Qigong's so much quicker to get the benefits from. Tai Chi takes a little
Yeah.
longer. Yeah.
And you teach Tai Chi and Qigong classes in person or online or anything?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. I have two public classes here in the Kansas City metro area through
yeah,
city governments, and I try to teach through city governments and hospitals and stuff because I don't want to have to worry
to
about
reach the most
liability
people.
insurance and rent and all
Uh-huh.
that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
want to show up and teach a class. But my mind body classes, I call them mind body classes. I've changed the name of it because when I called it Tai Chi, I would get these like really serious people that wanted to learn these Tai Chi forms that they'd seen on some TV show
Yeah.
or movie or something. And then they were all focused. And then there was no room, for
They kind of
consciousness
miss.
expansion
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And so I started calling it mind body classes. And I teach classes through the University of Kansas Health System, uh, Center for Turning Point Center for Hope and Healing. And those classes are free for anybody. They're Zoom classes 2 days a week.
Oh, good.
And they're free to anybody in the world who suffers from a chronic health issue. So if anybody has
Okay.
a chronic health issue, they can Google University of Kansas Turning Point, and they'll find Bill Douglas, Bill Douglas mind body classes. And I teach what they are. The core of the core of them is Tai Chi and Qigong and Neigong energy meditation. So it's like a body scan. It's very similar to Vipassana yoga, from what I've been told.
Okay. Yeah.
Where you're going through the body and just letting different
Yes.
parts relax and allowing space for the prana or the chi. And so I take them
Mhm.
through that. And then when we do the moving Qigong meditations, I have them do that with their eyes closed, just real simple, gentle moving Qigong meditations, just to get, out of the rat race and into the body and into the breath,
Yeah.
into the feeling, the heart-centered consciousness. And then we do a Tai Chi short form in my hospital classes. It's just like 6, 7 movements. And I created it originally for people with Parkinson's disease. And it was very successful. It changed people's lives, they told me. And so I just use that for my hospital classes now. But I've also incorporated a lot of things from yoga. For example, we do a mantra meditation. It's a simple counting meditation. We count 1 through 5 as we let ourselves be filled with the breath, and then
Yes.
6 through 12 on the sighing exhalations. And then I'm invoking, the qigong, letting go, song, letting go, letting go, letting go, like that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And so I've been able to weave some of the things from yoga into the classes, and people really like it.
I love that. That's really good. And can people that don't have a chronic condition be able to take those Zoom classes as well, or do you need
No,
a
they're only open to people with chronic health issues, but
okay,
they're free for people with chronic health issues. Yeah,
okay.
I've thought about starting a Zoom class, but I just, I've been so busy organizing World Tai Chi Day and now the Global Transformation Project, and
You
so.
seem to have many projects, so you keep busy for sure.
Well, one rolled into the other. The thing that World Tai Chi Day taught us was that their effect, especially, as it expanded and included yoga and meditation and mindfulness teachers and groups around the world. That really opened my eyes because I grew up in Western Kansas. I learned Tai Chi and Qigong meditation in California. And actually, I started studying a little bit of yoga back then in California too. And so I thought that this was just some kind of New York, LA thing, maybe London and Paris kind of thing. And, of
Yeah.
course, India and China, I thought everybody did it over there, and I was wrong about that. But but anyway, I was real naive. And then when we started organizing World Tai Chi Day, all of a sudden we started getting these videos of like massive World Tai Chi Day events in like Tehran, Iran. And in fact, all over Iran. There were like 14 cities in Iran that
Wow.
held these, really big. The one in Tehran was huge.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then all over South America and in Africa, all over Africa, people are doing this stuff.
Right on.
I had
Yes.
no idea about that. And so that really woke me up. And I realized that mind body had spread all the way around the planet. And then I started digging into the research on consciousness because I did a presentation at Folsom Prison many years ago. And I thought I was going to be introducing them to meditation and Tai Chi and Qigong, but they had already had a Tai Chi Cha program, which was a program that was created. I can't remember the guy's name, but it's Tai Chi Cha, CHIH, and Justin somebody, and beautiful guy. I don't think he's alive anymore, but anyway, he created a Tai Chi program that wasn't martial, and he was able
Okay.
to, and because of that, he was able to get it into prisons because prisons won't let you teach martial arts, which
Uh-huh.
makes total sense to me. You know,
Yeah.
And so my Tai Chi is not martial. It's just, it's flow, it's
It's love.
flow.
Yeah,
And, but it's powerful. And
of
so anyway,
course.
so I went to Folsom, and while I was there, I had a chance to talk to one of the inmates who was like an assistant teacher, and he was a fascinating guy. And he ended up getting out of Folsom eventually and becoming a Tai Chi Cha teacher. And he wrote on this extensively, and we published one of his articles on worldtaichiday.org. And he said that what they found during the 2 years of their Tai Chi Cha program was that the return to prison rates for the people in the Tai Chi Cha group, it had gone from 70%. That's the normally 70% of the people that get out of prison in
Come back.
right back in
Oh,
prison.
wow.
They went
Wow.
from the Tai Chi Cha group went from 70% down to 30%. That's huge.
Amazing.
We could be emptying our
Huge.
prisons.
Yeah.
If we were
I
really
remember
teaching
reading that.
this,
Yes, that's
yeah,
right.
yeah, we could be emptying, saving trillions of
Yeah,
dollars. And human misery, because when people go to prison, it doesn't just wreck their lives, it wrecks their whole family's
of
life.
course.
Yeah, so we could be solving these problems. And so anyway, but the thing that blew my mind about the Folsom data was that during that 2 years, the behavior rates, they call them incident rates. It's like fights, contraband, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the incident rates had dropped not just for the Tai Chi Cha group, but during that 2 years of the Tai Chi Cha program, the incident rates had improved for the entire prison.
So it's like a
And
ripple effect,
that's
right?
exactly right. The Maharishi effect is what it is. That's what the
Oh,
Transcendental Meditation Foundation. They've done tons of research on this, and I unearthed it all for this free Gospel of Science book I'm giving away today. And what they found was that if you bring in the equivalent of 1% of a city's population of high level meditators, it dramatically reduces the violent crime rates for the whole city, emergency room visits, all that kind of stuff. And so the first big city they did was Washington, D.C. And they did the study during the high crime season in August, and they were going to bring in 1% of high level meditators. And they told and so the police chief, the police department was involved, and also a university. They do these with universities and police departments. And the police chief, he was real smug. He didn't believe it. He didn't think they were going to do it. And they told him that they were going to bring the violent crime rates down 20% by the time they got 1% equivalent in meditating. And he wasn't buying it. Well, they ended up bringing the violent crime rate down 23%. 3% more
nice.
than they said they were.
That's
And
right.
then they've done this study. All this science is in the Gospel of Science, second edition. And they replicated these studies. One of them was in 48 cities, and I have this data in the book and the links to the studies and everything. And they brought the violent crime rates down in all 48 of those cities as compared to control cities. And that beneficial effect lasted for 5 years. 5 years.
Wow.
So we could be solving all of our social
Right.
problems. What I realized as I was putting all the science together was that if we brought mind body teachers, all these great yoga teachers and Tai Chi teachers, meditation teachers, John Kabat-Zinn's group, Transcendental Meditation Foundation, all these groups, if we brought them into public education, created a
Yeah.
1 hour a day mind body class, it'd be like a fusion of PE and health science. And
Yes.
so for 1 hour a day from kindergarten through 12th grade, kids are getting this mind body, and it would solve all these ADHD problems the kids are having,
Oh, for
and all
sure.
the problems. Everybody's worried
Including
about kids
myself.
being on technology all the time, what it's
Yes.
doing to kids' brains.
Oh, for
This would
sure.
solve all those problems. If they had 1 hour of contemplative mindfulness, and you would do it in a fun way, like I've taught in public
Yeah.
education. We do in Qigong, we have something called animal Qigong, where you pretend to be, like a lion or,
Okay. So it's like
whatever.
there's animal yoga kind of similar like
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, yoga.
Yeah.
There's a yoga teacher that I've watched that teaches kids, and she's great
Okay.
on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could all be doing this, and we could all be learning from each other, and then
Yeah.
sharing the science, and then the schools that have the biggest benefit, those teachers could be sharing with the other teachers, and we could literally solve the world's problems. And again, Organizing World Tai Chi Day showed us there are effective mind-body teachers in every city on the planet. Though everything is in place. What people don't realize, and that includes most of my Tai Chi and Qigong community that I deal with, what they don't realize is what a pivotal place we're in as humanity. No generation, in all the generations of mind body teachers, No generation has had all this scientific validation of this stuff, of what this stuff can do. And most mind body teachers have no clue of how profound this stuff is. And when I learned the science and I learned how profound it was, my potential for enjoying the benefits of mind body began to expand. And I'm able to do things I never thought. I'm almost 70 years old, and I can do things that I couldn't do, at my prime. And it's all
Yeah.
because of becoming aware of a larger possibility. And so most mind body teachers have no idea of the depth and the breadth of possibility of what they're teaching. And if they could learn that, if they could get the Gospel of Science second edition, which is free today,
Right.
and learn all this science, it would take their practice and their teaching to a whole other level. And then they would see why we need to get this into public education. And then they would be encouraging their students to go to globaltransformationproject.org and sign the petition. We need signatures from people in every country all over the world, because when we get 100,000 signatures, we really believe we should be able to get millions of signatures. I mean, there's so many hundreds of millions of people benefiting from mind body. They should pay it forward and sign this petition and get people to sign the petition. And then if we take millions of signatures from all over the world, and what we're going to do is we're going to lobby every United Nations mission on the planet to become co-sponsors of a resolution advocating mind-body non-binding resolution. Nobody be forced to do it. No country, no student, nobody forced to do it. It doesn't work that way. But it would be a non-binding resolution to get this science out to public educators all over the world to realize that they could be taking education to a whole other level, because these mind-body practices, regular meditators, their IQs increased 20 points. Now, there can't be a sane teacher on the planet who would look at that and go, "Oh, we don't want that for our students."
Right? Exactly.
And while it's doing that, it's improving their GRE reading scores, their verbal fluency, just all levels, test scores, all levels. The research is in all the stuff. You can see a lot of it at globaltransformationproject.org. We have it there. And we also have some of the top minds in mind, body, and health and education who have signed on to this. And so you can feel real safe referring people to this to sign the petition. But we need to get mind body people all over the planet getting this petition signed so that we can get this to the United Nations, get the co-sponsors. And the reason that we realized we could do this is because when they created the International Day of Yoga, that passed with a record number of co-sponsoring nations. 177 nations co-sponsored the International Day of Yoga. The world had never, ever come together over anything like they did for the International Day of Yoga. And it was done to increase global health and global harmony. So imagine 1 hour a day in public schools, mind, body, all over the planet. What would that do for health and harmony all over the planet? It would save trillions of dollars. The science is in on all this stuff. Every year we'd be saving trillions on healthcare, prison costs, police costs, all this stuff. So many pharmaceuticals people wouldn't need anymore. We'd be saving so much money, misery.
Well, myself, I'm a mind body teacher. I had Crohn's. I was also a public school teacher in Canada and Ontario. I got Crohn's disease in my second year of teaching. I took about 3 more years till I was diagnosed. Just testing. And then even when I was diagnosed, what did they put me on? NSAIDs, steroids, whatever you can imagine, and then medications on top of medications for the side effects. And when I went to my specialist and was talking about wanting to heal myself naturally, they didn't want to have anything to do with me. And then when I decided, I left my teaching job and all of these things behind while I was healing. And then I chose to come to Costa Rica. And when I came to Costa Rica, I got a little nervous. I thought, what if something happened? I don't know what the medical system is like here. So I said, maybe I should go to the specialist and get some medication just in case something happens. So I got in my last colonoscopy in the specialist, and they found 0 trace of disease.
Wow.
And then they were interested in what I did.
That I hear that from students all the time about how the doctors are like that.
Right. They're just like, no, get away from us. And then all of a sudden they're like, interesting, what did you do? And then so I became very passionate. I was like my own science experiment, you start seeing
Same here.
like
same here.
And And then you want to help the world, and you realize those loved ones next to you, like your parents and like whatever, whoever, and they're not interested, and but there's billions of people on the planet. Then there's so many that want this information and maybe don't even know it's available. Like all this science you're talking about. I'm
Yeah.
so interested to go on to your page and take a look at it, because it's just like it's everything I ever wanted to see,
It,
you know?
it'll blow your mind. It'll blow your
Yeah,
mind. At some point you should get the Gospel of Science second edition, because I
yeah,
actually listen to my own Audible book once in a while because I can't remember everything that's in there. But
yeah,
when I hear all that again, it gives me such a much more hopeful view of who I am and what my potential is and what society's
right.
potential, because people get this real dismal picture of possibility in the
Uh-huh.
world.
It's true.
One of the
And that
things.
also creates its own ripple effect, no?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, what I always tell my students is stop watching corporate media, because
yeah,
it's all fear-based. Yeah, it's all
yeah,
fear-based, and this is all validated. I get into all
yeah,
this in the Gospel of Science about
yeah,
how media has figured out that fear sells. And so they try to make their programming just as terrifying as possible because it
yeah,
generates these stress chemicals, and then we get addicted to the stress chemicals, and then we keep coming back to watch more and more of it.
yeah,
And so I
yeah,
always tell my students, just start watching YouTube. It's like the jukebox of the universe. It's like
yeah.
you go on there, you can find so many fascinating things,
That's
about
true.
everything. And but I get into all this in the book, and like one of the things I do a lot of, I used to do a lot of corporate stress management stuff. And one of the things I'd always talk about is I'd ask people, do you think the world's more violent than it has been before? Do you think violent crime's worse than it's been before? And they all raise their hand. Yeah, yeah, it is. Of course it is. I watch the news. Well, it's
Yeah.
not. It's not. It's at 40-year lows. Violent crime rates are at
Wow.
40-year lows in the United States. Nobody in the news ever tells anybody that. They never tell
That's
anybody,
crazy.
oh, you guys
Yeah.
should really calm down and relax, because the world is way safer than it used to be. Like people that have little kids, they think child abduction rates are like through the roof. They're not. They're
Yeah.
at lows. And I was doing a podcast on a yoga program, Healing Our Earth, out of India
Yeah.
and the UK. And so there was a yoga teacher. There was a yoga teacher from India and a yoga teacher from the UK. And I was talking about this very same thing about how we can really help our students, find a more relaxing way of seeing the world.
Yeah.
And if they knew the facts, like I was just talking about with violent crime rates are at 40-year lows. Well, right after I said that, it only took about 5 minutes for those two yoga teachers, the one in the UK and the one in India, to start talking. They were bemoaning how their empathy for their students, because of course their students are dealing with so much stress because, the streets are just so much more violent than they've used to be. This was only 5 minutes after I said that violent crime rates are at a 40-year low. So then after that program, I started doing some research on the UK and India because I knew in my book I had UN data that said violent crime rates are at 40-year lows in most of the world. But I thought, well, maybe UK and India is different because these ladies, they just heard me say the violent crime rates are 40-year lows, and here they are, bemoaning with their students. Because when we do that with our students, we're confirming a fearful
Yeah.
unreality to our students. That's not
That's
our
true.
job. Our job is to
Yeah.
spread some truth and reality,
Yeah.
especially when it's relaxing and calming. So anyway,
Yeah.
so I went on and I did some research. Yeah, no, violent crime rates are at decades lows in both India and the UK. But both of
Wow.
these teachers thought thought that the violent crime rates were through the roof because they watch the news all the time. And I told them the news is distorting this. And so what do? Well, when they go to their class and their students, because it happens in my classes, I'll go to class and I'll hear students, bemoaning, the sad state of the world and how out of control
Yeah.
and violent and everything is. And I just correct them. Every time I hear them saying that, I say, you know what? That's not true. That's not true. What I say, that's not true, and you should stop watching the news
Yeah.
because they're
Most
distorting
importantly,
they're
yeah.
distorting reality. But I just told that Indian and UK yoga teacher 5 minutes later they were complaining about how violent the streets were. 5 minutes later, and that it wasn't from their personal lives. It was because they
Yeah.
watch TV, they watch the news. That's how they
Of
get this
course. And they got caught
distorted
up in
image.
it as well.
Yeah.
Wow. And so I remember you saying about with the jail, how they came to the conclusion that it was like it went from 70% going back to down to 30 or something
Yeah.
like this. I can't remember.
Yep.
Is that what you said? And that's kind of how you got the science of that information. But in the hospital settings, when all this data was collected, what were they measuring?
Oh, well, like on our World Tai Chi Day site, we have science for 100 of the most common health issues. Yeah,
Okay.
so heart disease, ADD, ADHD, depression, anxiety,
Autoimmune conditions.
I'm sorry.
I said autoimmune
Oh, yes,
conditions.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to teach a class through the university health system for people with fibromyalgia. And it was one thing I noticed, it was mostly women. It was almost all women. And the thing that I realized as I was teaching them is what they all had in common was they just weren't able to let go. They were very driven.
Yeah.
They were very driven. And there's nothing wrong with being driven. I'm driven too. But I have
Until
to
it takes control.
yeah, I got to make space.
Yeah.
I have to
Me
do,
too.
yeah, I got to do the yoga. Got to do the Tai Chi. I got to do the
Yeah.
Qigong. I get saunas. Everybody should get saunas.
Yeah.
Science
Great
on
idea.
saunas is huge too.
What do you feel about ice plunges?
I haven't had the nerve to do that, and I don't have access to it anyway.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
do have
But so
saunas.
okay. Saunas is good for sure.
It's probably
But
great. I just,
did they test their heart rate and it had gone down? This
oh
is what
yeah,
I was wondering.
hypertension, all that stuff gets
Okay.
cured. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. No,
Very nice.
no. Dr. Herbert Benson's book, The Relaxation Response, that's the Bible of this stuff, really. And if you look at his book, what his research showed is that between 60 and 90% of the health issues people deal with are caused by stress and
For
best
sure.
treated or prevented by Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, and mindfulness. And
Isn't it
that was
amazing?
yeah,
What?
and that was validated by a 20-year study at Kaiser Permanente. And what they found was that 70% of the health issues that were sending patients to their doctors were caused by stress. And when I contacted Kaiser, because I was really excited about that, because it fit with what I'd been reading with Herbert Benson and all this stuff, and so I contacted him and I talked to Dr. David Sabel at Kaiser, who was familiar with the research. And he said that number could go as high as 85%, depending on how you looked at the data. So basically, our whole health crisis, our whole economic crisis caused by our health system, because the United States, I think we're spending $5.5 trillion every year on healthcare. All that could go away. All that could go away. The only prisons in the United States are private. They're money-making institutions. And the healthcare system is a massive money-making institution.
Yeah.
And so those two institutions, they're not going to be making very much money once we get mind-body into public education, kindergarten through 12th grade. And that's the only reason this hasn't happened, because there's no
That's what I was going to say just
rational.
now. I'm like, do you think that's what has caused it to move slower or the
Yeah,
blockage?
it's all money. Yeah.
Of course.
I actually got an interview with the New York Times Sunday magazine one time.
Yeah.
And it was right when World Tai Chi Day was really getting big, and I had all this science, and I started working with a writer who was writing this article for the New York Times Sunday magazine. That's the most read publication on the planet, or at least it was at that time. And I spent a week feeding her all this research, and she was so excited. I think she was thinking Pulitzer Prize. I think she was thinking she was going to get Pulitzer. And I was giving her all this data, all the research, all the sources and everything, because it's all in the Gospel of Science and the sources. It's like a textbook. It's all meticulously endnoted, just like a textbook. So you can see all this, where it all came from. But anyway, so I'm feeding her all this, and she's going to write this article it's going to talk about how, we could end our healthcare crisis. We could be saving trillions of dollars every year. She's really excited about this. And then the mistake that I made was that I started bragging about it in our global newsletter, because we have an open newsletter that anybody can sign up for, worldtaichiday.org. And so I started bragging about, we're going to be in the New York Times. It's going to have this article. It's going to save the world trillions of dollars. It's going to really cut medical care costs, all this kind of stuff. Well, what I didn't realize was that like these pharmaceutical companies and stuff, they consider us the competition. I didn't realize it. I was naive at the time. And so
Yeah.
they watch what you're doing. And they apparent, I mean, I can't prove this, but what I can tell you is that about 3 days before that article came out, I was talking to the reporter and she was very angry. Now I didn't know her that well. We'd had a pretty great relationship, me feeding her all the information and everything, but we weren't like personal friends. I didn't know why she was mad. I thought maybe I did something wrong. Well, anyway, what happened was this multi-page article that was going to change the world that she wrote, it had all got cut down to like three little paragraphs, really like one paragraph.
Uh-huh.
None of the science was in it. And then, but I was still excited about being mentioned in the New York Times Sunday magazine. So I bought like 25 copies of the magazine and I sent it out to, friends, relatives and stuff. Well, anyway, I was in Scotland visiting somebody who I'd sent it to. And she said, "Have you looked at that magazine?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I read the article a bunch of times." and, and she said, "No, did you look at the magazine?" And I said, "No." And she pulled it out and started flipping through it. Well, there was a pharmaceutical company had bought a multi-page pharmaceutical ad, and it ate up all the column space.
Ah,
So the public got denied all this science.
wow. I mean, I'm not surprised,
Yeah,
but
yeah, money.
wild.
That's the only reason.
Yeah,
That's the only reason we're not teaching school kids how to do this stuff already.
of course.
All of us
Yeah.
who are teaching this stuff, we should be in there teaching, whoever we're comfortable with, high schoolers, kindergartners, whatever. Everybody's better at different things. But
Well,
yeah,
back then, I eventually left teaching at the time because, well, I told you I got the Crohn's, and then I was healing that, and I was trying in my healing and relaxation practices and yoga, meditation, everything I was learning. I was trying to implement that. I was the main phys ed and not meditation, phys ed and health teacher in schools. And so I started to implement like yoga movement and
that's great.
meditation and things like that with my classes. And I think it was going quite well. And I was reprimanded by my principal and told I wasn't allowed to implement it any longer.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that
so I
happens.
kind of hit my edge at that point, which is
Yeah, that
why I
would have
was,
been very frustrating.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
very frustrating.
Well, see, that's why we want to get the United Nations resolution
Of
because
course, yeah,
if we can get that United Nations resolution with all the science backing it, then all the educators like yourself, because there's people just doing just like what you were talking about.
yeah,
There are already
yeah.
teachers doing this in public schools all over
Well,
the
yes,
world.
I know a number of them now that are
Yeah,
doing
and
it
and
too.
and they're having great success. But if they
Yeah,
had that UN resolution backed with all that science, and they could take it into their board meetings or their teacher meetings or whatever, and they could say, "Oh, have you seen what the UN is recommending?" And they have all this
yeah,
science about how it's going to make our kids more intelligent. And so what we do is we take it all out of the esoteric realm. It's just hard science. And the hard science
right.
shows if we're
Yeah,
teaching kids how to meditate on a regular basis, their IQ is going to be 20 points higher. And any
yeah,
educator who tells you that they don't want kids with 20-point higher IQs should not be an educator.
that's correct.
And our
I
goal
agree.
is to make all of this more and more obvious.
Yes,
You know what I mean? Because it's all kind of subterfuged and, kind of
for
weird
sure.
how it's all happening. We want to just bring it right out in the open, say, look, the science is in on this. It's insane not to be teaching kids how to do this. They don't need to be on ADD and ADHD drugs most of the time. They don't need to be
Yeah,
on all this stuff.
yeah,
Antidepressants, the research shows meditation has the same biochemical benefits as pharmaceutical treatment without all the horrific side effects for depression.
exactly.
So there is no reason to have kids on antidepressants.
Agreed.
Yeah, probably,
Yeah,
maybe there's an exceptional case. I'm not going to say
of
blanket,
course.
but I'm saying the majority of these kids don't have to be on these medications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so implementing that into the public school system, is that what is the Global Transformation Project?
Yes. What we have is we have a petition, and we need to get mind body people all over the planet, yoga, Tai Chi, meditation, Qigong, mindfulness, all these groups, all these organizations, they need to be getting people to sign that petition. Now, once we get at least 100,000 signatures, but really in my mind, I just can't believe that we can't get millions of signatures on this.
Of course.
Once the mind body people start telling their students to go sign this, it can all happen so fast. So I always tell people, when they say, oh yeah, this should happen. I wonder why it's not happening. And then I'll say, well, have you signed the petition at Global Transformation Project? And they'll go, no. And I'll say, well, that's why it's not happening. Have you told your
Step
students
number
to sign
one.
it? No. Well, that's why it's not happening. Because once
Okay.
we get all the signatures, what we're going to do, me and my wife, we've committed ourselves. We're going to dedicate ourselves to lobbying the every United Nations mission on the planet, every country's United Nations mission. We're going to lobby them. We're going to provide them all the science, showing what this could do for their school children, showing how it could save their society untold, millions or billions or trillions of dollars. And saved healthcare costs, prison costs, all that, police costs, all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to start getting co-sponsors. And then once we get a few co-sponsors, then we're going to, try to get those co-sponsors to help us get other co-sponsors so that we can get this up like with the International Day of Yoga. But the science is in it. It's also obvious. It's also ready to happen. And really what it takes mostly is for us to envision this possibility because it all makes sense. The main thing that holds me back from me, like when I talk to my fellow Tai Chi and Qigong people who don't get it, a lot of these people, I've worked with for years with World Tai Chi Day, and they don't get what I'm talking about. And I'm like, well, this can't happen unless we can expand our consciousness to see a larger possibility for humanity.
Absolutely.
And that's what our practices are designed to do.
And that's why it's so important not to get stuck in the fear and the news and everything that we're talking about, having that visualization of the vision of what you want to implement. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So that's what Global Transformation Project.org is. It has the petition. Everybody should just be making that part of their social media habit. Have you signed the petition? Global Transformation Project.org.
I'm definitely, it's going to be a part of mine, that's for sure. And is that how people get involved then? Is just by signing the petition right now?
Well, when they sign the petition, then they will get updates from us occasionally. We try not to send a huge number of them out. But we want to keep people posted. Now, we also have other things people can do. We always, like with World Tai Chi Day, we always urged everybody, just look at the website, look at the science, you'll be an expert. We've got it all there. And then just consider yourself an ambassador for the Global Transformation Project. And so then, whenever you do interviews or if you're doing a class or something, you can tell people about it, tell students about it, and it'll give them a hopeful view of the future of the planet. To know all we've got to do is just let them know all we got to do is get mind, body, and public education. It's going to solve so many of our problems. And then that way they don't have this dismal apocalyptic view of the future, because the science shows that the biggest indicator, they did like a 20-year study, and the biggest indicator of what our future is going to be is our chronic everyday vision of what we think our future is going to be. And so the people who saw themselves as decrepit and sick as they got older, they got decrepit and sick, right? But the ones who didn't see that and had a new vision. So I'm constantly, changing my vision. And I encourage all my students to watch Dr. Joe Dispenza on YouTube. How we program, how we get programmed, and how we.
He can connect to a lot of people the way he talks.
Because I think the mind body stuff, it's designed to get us to constantly let go. Let go, let go, let go, let go, let go, let go, let go of every. In the Tao Te Ching, it says, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." And so Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's talking about envisioning what we want to be, what world we want to have.
And whose quote is it? That's be the change we want to see in the world? Who is that?
Right. And so, the mind-body practices are, combined with that, Dr. Joe Dispenza reprogramming how we program ourselves and our future. All that is shown scientifically to be able to usher in this new world. And, and the thing is, it would be so cheap to bring, it would be so inexpensive. It would be such a non-big deal for schools to be bringing mind-body teachers in to become part of public education 1 hour a day. It'd take a lot of mind-body teachers, to teach K through 12.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it would employ.
it would not only improve their grade scores, like you said, but it's going to improve everything, like like the way that they interact with each other, probably like things like bullying and things, the
Oh
way that
yeah.
they talk, probably would be going down significantly as well, right?
Yeah, Global Transformation Project, we have a page that shows where mind body's already being implemented in public schools. And invariably the bullying rates go down, just like at Folsom
Oh,
Prison. And what
yeah,
happens is when we go into alpha state, in Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, mindfulness, if we do them all in that mindful state, where we're, really feeling the
yeah,
breath, feeling the sensation, then the brain starts to go into alpha brainwave state. And what the science shows is that when we go into alpha brainwave state on a regular basis, two significant, well, lots of things, but two really significant things happen in the brain. One is the stress and fear part of the brain actually physically shrinks. So it's
that
not
that's
just like,
that's
yeah,
amazing.
so it's
Yeah,
cumulative. It's not like we're just calming ourselves when we meditate. We're changing our brain to be less fearful and less panicked,
makes
actually
so much
changing
more
it.
sense.
And then the other significant thing is the empathy and compassion parts of the brain get larger.
Yeah, that also makes sense.
Yeah. So, like
Because,
with the Global Transformation Project, it's purely scientific. We keep it purely scientific because we're trying to get into schools. So, we don't
yeah,
want to fudge it with anything else. But if you just stop and think about it, as we get this stuff into public education on a massive scale, what it is, it's going to be the equivalent of a mass global spiritual awakening because
yeah,
the empathy and
amazing.
compassion parts of people's brains all over the planet. And then another thing that happened, and this will be really interesting to your yoga viewers. I always ask people, what does World Tai Chi Day, World Yoga Day, and World Peace Meditation Day all have in common? Well, Princeton University Engineering and Anomalies Research uh, Laboratory, they discovered that people's consciousness could affect computers. And they designed these computers that would be sensitive to people's consciousness, and they put them all over the planet. And the first thing that they found was during Princess Diana's funeral, when the whole planet, because she was pretty beloved around the planet. And so when the whole
Yeah.
planet their consciousness all came together around Princess Diana's funeral, their computers went off track. They called it a departure from expectation. And what that showed was an increase in coherence in global consciousness. But then they started looking at uh, global consciousness events like World Tai Chi Day or World Yoga Day or World Peace Meditation Day. And
Yeah.
what they found was that when people went into states of compassion and healing, which is what these kind of events are all about, it sent their computers off track. And they realized that when people's consciousness is in a state of connection and healing and compassion, in a global event,
Yeah.
that is more powerful than when people's consciousness is in states of fear and stress. So we're
So
most
it's even
powerful.
stronger,
Yeah, we're
the
we're
positive.
we're stronger when we're in states of connection and compassion. And what is yoga? Yoga means union. Tai Chi is the same thing. Tai Chi was
Yeah,
the universe before the Big Bang. I'm not talking about the physical
yeah,
exercise, but the Tai
yeah.
Chi, it was the universe before the Big Bang when everything was one, like in yoga,
Hmm.
union. And so that's what these things are designed to do is to cultivate union in consciousness, in the body and mind, and in society and throughout. And so the science shows that that's when we're in our most powerful state. And so World Yoga Day, World Tai Chi Day, and World Peace Meditation Day, they all measurably increase coherence in global consciousness. And the TM
Amazing. Yeah.
Foundation and the TM Foundation research shows us what happens when that happens is your violent crime rates go down. People start getting along together better, you know? People start
Yeah.
finding how to flow together instead of,
Yeah.
doing that all the time. Yeah, and it's already happening. It's already happening because, like I was saying, violent crime rates are at 40-year lows all over the planet, and that's related to the spread of yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation and mindfulness all over the planet. And I credit, anytime I get a chance to, I credit the Beatles a lot for that because the
Yeah.
Beatles, yeah,
Yeah.
people that are younger than me, they don't grasp what a phenomenon the Beatles were. There was nobody in history that was looked at by the whole planet and really adored by people, kids all over
Yeah.
the planet, like the Beatles. They were this whole phenomenon. And
And they did the transcendental meditation, right?
right, yeah, George Harrison, he said, we were four working class kids, and all of a sudden we could buy anything. We could buy anything and everything that we wanted. And what we realized was that doesn't make you happy. And so we
Yes.
were trying to figure out how to find happiness. And that led them to the Maharishi and to India. And so all the media cameras in the world followed the Beatles to India. And so there were kids all over the world like me, in Western Kansas, that little Western Kansas farm town. Kids like me were looking at this and they were going, wow, what's this meditation thing?
Yeah.
And so yeah, the Beatles, and of course their songs, they sang about all this stuff all the time. Their
Amazing.
songs lyrics had the word love over
All you
600
need is
times.
love. Isn't that the Beatles lyrics?
Exactly. Yeah, 600 times they use the word love in their lyrics. That's why
Wow.
the world loved them, because they sang
Yeah.
about love all the time. Yeah.
How beautiful.
Yeah, and it was started by two boys, John Lennon and Paul McCartney, who both lost their mothers when they were boys.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that. That's
yeah, so
interesting.
love is what they were looking for.
Yeah.
That was their whole
Wow.
journey.
Wow. Thank you so much. I
Yeah,
feel
so
like we got a lot of good information here today.
yeah, so as mind body people, we're ushering in a whole new a whole new world. And the more that we find our esteem, and for me personally, learning all that science gave me so much more esteem about this stuff. Because
Yeah.
like working in hospital settings and like you experienced in the education system, it's really easy to get beat down, because the systems I work for, I'm seeing people get healed from things in these classes on a regular basis.
Oh yeah,
And,
I bet.
and the institution pays no attention to it whatsoever.
No, of course not.
Yeah, because it doesn't
Yeah.
make anybody money.
Yeah.
And so it's really easy to lose your esteem about how valuable our own personal mind body practice is and how
Absolutely.
valuable we are as mind body teachers. Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, and mindfulness. We are incredible treasures at this moment in time in history, and the world really needs us. And we should be in every kindergarten class, every first grade class, every second grade class, third grade, all the way through 12th grade. It's just insane that this isn't happening, and we
Absolutely.
can all make it happen. And so we provided the petition so that we could get some soul force behind this, and we know the UN's open to it. So it's a matter of the mind body community finding our esteem and standing up and going, it's crazy that you're not utilizing us.
Absolutely. That's great. For sure. Well, thank you so much. I hope that I'm going to get all this information put up, and I hope that people will come and sign. I'm going to keep sharing, and I will share with all my mind body
Cool.
friends and colleagues so that we can continue to build this vision because I think it's a beautiful one.
That would be great. Yeah, and I'd love to
Yeah.
add you. We have that section where we have all the leading scientists and educators and
Yeah.
stuff, and you have a background in education, and then plus your mind body. And
Yeah.
we'd love to get your well, I think I already put you on because I talked to you about that.
You might have. I
I
think
think
you
I
might have
did. Yeah,
actually.
I think
Yeah.
if you go to the link, you'll see that I've got you up there. But I want to put your podcast on there as well. I was thinking we could
Okay,
put a link
great.
to your podcast. Yeah,
Yeah.
Heal. That'd be great. Have you seen that documentary, Heal?
I don't know. I feel like I
Oh,
have
you
seen
got to watch it. You got to watch it. One of my
it.
students got me to watch it. He
Okay.
found out I hadn't seen it. He said, "Oh my God, Bill!" He goes, "You got to watch this." He goes, "It's everything you talk about every week," and
Beautiful.
and it's an incredible documentary. And so since I've seen it, I saw it on Amazon Prime. I think it's still on Amazon Prime. But I've been, almost demanding that all my students watch it.
Yeah,
Because,
okay. I'm gonna
see, one of the
definitely take a
problem,
look.
yeah, one of the biggest problem I'm having in my hospital classes is people's consciousness doors are closed because they've been conditioned to think that, all this science that I'm telling them about and
Mhm.
everything, that they can heal, that they very well may be able to heal from these conditions they have, and their
Yeah.
doctors should know about this, so they can change their medication if they need to or whatever. They won't believe it, and if they don't believe it, then the door slams shut. Even though I'm
Well, I
teaching
think
great,
I might have been that person before I actually healed. I was that person, I think.
there you
I had a
go.
really hard time. I was the kind of girl that left the yoga class before Shavasana, like
Right.
I I saw it as a workout and not a relaxation practice
Hmm.
or something. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so yeah, I was that, and I realized, and it wasn't until I met my meditation teacher, Jivasu, who has a lot of, he's also a medical doctor, and so he has a lot of the medical research that
Oh,
would kind of
that's a treasure.
prove, like proving the
Oh,
point of meditation.
he should be on our supporters page too.
I'll definitely send it to him. And he kind of opened my eyes because I was very sciencey minded back
Yep.
then. And so once I started seeing those connections, it helped me to open my little door. And then
See,
when I started realizing, wow, like this part, like the Shavasana was probably the most important part of the yoga
yeah,
class, and
yeah,
the
right, right.
meditation and the
Yeah, it
breath work,
shifts everything.
the symptoms started going down. I never had relieved the pain like in my belly and colon
Uh-huh.
area
Uh-huh.
until I started practicing breath work and meditation. Like all of this is just so beautiful. But I just wanted to say I
It's
was that person.
extraordinary.
So I think everyone can change if I could.
Yeah, yeah, it's extraordinary, and that's why I had to start. That's why I decided to start giving away the Gospel of Science second edition on every World Tai Chi Day, World Yoga Day, and World Peace Meditation Day, because it was just so incredibly frustrating to me that people were being denied this science, and if they
Yeah,
didn't come across a doctor like your doctor, and they're
yeah,
rare, trust me, they're very
yeah.
rare.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah, for
but
sure.
I
I
had
know.
just to give you an example of what I deal with is in one of my hospital classes, I had a student, and one day she'd been doing the class for a few months, and one day she came in real concerned, and she asked me, she said, "Do these things give people low blood pressure?" And I said, "Well, no, not that I've ever heard of." And then I realized what was going on because I'd had this happen to me several other times over the years. I said, "Are you on hypertension meds?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Well," I said, "you need to talk to your doctor because," I said, what may be happening is that the practices that you're doing in here are making your blood pressure normal. But the
Yeah,
blood pressure medication, it doesn't understand normal. All it
yeah,
knows is make blood pressure lower. And so what's happening is you're getting normal blood pressure from practice, from all this stuff we're doing in here, but your blood pressure medication is making it too low now. And so
too
talk to
low.
your doctor and he'll probably adjust your dosage. And so
Yes,
then a week later, she comes back in, she's all stressed out. And she said he wouldn't lower my medication. He refused to. He said he'd put me on a different medication, but same dosage. And he kept her on that same dosage. And because she had had such acute hypertension, they had her monitored. She was being computer monitored, you know what I mean, on a regular basis, like a
yes,
daily basis. And so she was chronically low blood pressure. That's not good for you. That's not
no,
good. That is not good for you to
yeah,
be walking around with low blood pressure. And anyway, this dynamic between me and her doctor, it was too stressful for her.
of
So guess what
course.
she did? She dropped out of the class so that she would keep the high blood pressure and she could keep taking the hypertension meds that her doctor wanted her to take. That
Because
was
he
how
didn't want her to
that was
not.
how
Yeah,
how twisted is this?
that's so
This is so
twisted.
friggin' twisted. And then I had a doctor in one of my classes, one of my hospital classes, and he was going through all kinds of stuff. He was imploding, and
Yeah,
and it was because he was locked in his head all the time. I can almost see people almost wear it on their faces,
no,
and
for sure.
yeah, you can
Yeah,
see it. You can see why
yeah,
everything's going haywire inside.
yeah,
And yeah, and so so he, he was trying to rehab from something, and he started lifting weights. And I said, "You know what?" I said, "I wouldn't be lifting weights right now." He said, "What I'd be doing, I'd just be doing the Tai Chi and the Qigong. It's real low impact. It'll build up your strength, and then you can ease into larger exercises later on." Well, he ignored me, and he gave himself a hernia. And so he had this hernia. So then he had to go get hernia surgery. And so he goes in to get hernia surgery, and he's got an abdominal incision. And he said, "I'm doing the meditation." He came to the Zoom class. He said, "I'm doing the meditation," but he said, "I'm not going to do the moving qigong. I've got this incision." And I said, "Well," I said, "let me tell you a little story. Many years ago, I got way away from all my mind body practice. And I just had really bad life habits, drinking too much, all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I got myself into a situation where I had to go have emergency surgery. I had to go to Mexico because I didn't have health insurance. Small businesses couldn't really afford health insurance in the United States at that
Yeah.
time. So I ended up going to Mexico and I got an abdominal surgery, an emergency abdominal surgery. Now I changed my life after that. I dove back into my mind body practice. But anyway, when I was in the hospital, I had this abdominal incision and I was doing my meditation, like Vipassana yoga, the Gong energy meditation. And then I would get out of my hospital bed and I would do these really gentle moving Qigong, rotations and movements, just real gentle, because I had an incision. Well, anyway, this went on for a few days. And all of a sudden, my Mexican doctor, my surgeon, he started bringing other doctors into the room, and they were all standing over me, speaking Spanish, looking at me. And I started getting worried. I was thinking, "Oh my God, what's going on here?"
This
And
isn't
so,
good.
so after they left, I asked the nurse because the nurse was pretty bilingual, and I said, "How come he's bringing all these doctors in here?" And he said, "Oh, he said he's been bringing them in here because he has never seen an incision heal as fast as your incision healed."
Wow, that's really good
Yeah.
news.
And so I had this doctor in my class who just had hernia surgery, right? And I
Yeah.
said, okay, I said, look, I said, he said, I can't do the Qigong, and I said, look, I said, and I told him this story about what happened to me in Mexico.
Yeah.
I said, if you get things moving gently, it's going to reestablish circulation. It's going to move all the tissue and the cells to the places it needs to go. You know what I mean? It'll really expedite the healing process. But I said, you just do it really gently, really mindfully. You don't strain your incision or anything like that.
Yeah.
And he was like really adamant, this doctor. And he goes, I can't do that. He said, my doctor said I can't do that. He said, my doctor said I can only walk 1 mile a day.
And he was a doctor, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, walk a mile a day?
Yeah.
That is high impact exercise.
Yeah, that would be way more
That
impact.
would be way more. So he just like completely ignored. So anyway, that's why I started giving away the gospel of science because I realized people need to see this science,
Yeah.
And it's like once they see the science and then they entertain the possibility of it, then their mind body practice becomes much greater possibility. It unlocks,
Yeah.
just like you experienced, like you're a living example of it. Yeah. And me
Yeah.
too, really. It's like, change. Like one of the things that happened to me, as I talked to all these scientists and I started learning, about what it can do for focus and consciousness and all this, and then learning all this, it really threw me back into my mind body practice so that I was really, doing all this stuff much more, and on a regular basis. And so anyway, I started going to the gym to get away from the computer. And so, I was at the gym, just in the afternoon, just get away from the computer. So I started shooting baskets on the basketball court, just to do something physical. And
Yeah.
and I was horrible at basketball in school. I tried out for the basketball team 1 year, and I was so horrible. I virtually never picked up basketball again for 50 years after that. And that's how bad I was. But anyway, so I went to the gym, just a few years ago and started shooting. And this was after I'd, immersed in all this science and threw myself back into my body. And so one day I was shooting at the gym, and there were a couple little kids, and one of them elbowed the other kid when I walked by, and he pointed at me and he goes, "Hey, there's the guy that never misses." And I was like, "Wow." And so then I brought in my camera the next day and I videotaped myself shooting. And then I went home and I looked at my stats, my statistics. I was out shooting the NBA. I was out shooting almost every player in the National
Yeah.
Basketball Association, a kid who sucked at basketball in school. And it's all from this relaxation, practicing relaxation, becoming
Absolutely.
aware of the body, the sensations, and letting the mind, go into alpha and relax out of the way.
Yeah.
And you develop this incredible focus. And to this day, I was shooting free throws at that time, but now I'm shooting mid-range and three-pointers, and I'm making three-pointers at an NBA level. And I'm shooting. There's like young guys on the court, real basketball players, not people like me. Big,
Yeah.
strong young men, and I'm shooting as good or better than almost all of them. I mean, it blows my mind. I'm almost 70 years old. It's
Yeah.
like
That's
we're being sold a bill of goods by media, which is almost all the mainstream health news media is their advertising dollars come from pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
You know, at the end
Yeah.
of almost every health newscast in the United States, at the end it'll say brought to you by Pfizer Corporation,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Yeah, that's
That's
the
right.
only reason people aren't hearing about this stuff. Yeah, we're in the midst of a revolution, and the gospel of science it'll help you become part of this revolution as a mind-body
Yeah.
teacher and practitioner. And we need you. The world needs you.
Yeah.
It needs you to be awake and
Well,
aware.
we need you too. Yes. We're
Well,
glad you're here.
well, one thing's for sure, I can't do anything unless it inspires other people. Because that's
Of
like
course.
world. I always tell everybody about World Tai Chi Day. If me and my wife would have been the only people that showed up on that lawn 26 years ago, you
Yeah.
think the TV stations would have covered it? You think anybody would have cared about it? No, it was because mind-body people all around the planet knew it was
Yeah.
time for this to happen. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, activate the mind-body community all over the world to become activists as well as mind-body practitioners.
So important.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your vision and everything that you have done over the years. And I will be sharing all of your information. Let's try and move these signatures up and get to as many mind-body practitioners that we can. And I thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
taking this time with me today. And I hope that we can talk again.
Yeah, it's so nice meeting you, April. I'm really glad we
Yeah,
made the connection.
awesome. I hope you have a beautiful day. And I will
Oh,
get that recording to you soon.
that'd be awesome.
Okay. Much love. Have a beautiful day.
You too.